That's because it's looking at itself, right? So I need to, yeah. See now,
It says it will begin in 4 minutes.
just refresh it.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
You can see the screen.
yeah.
Can you see this?
You saw the earlier screen.
Is it?
Yeah. One goes to this. That's a delay. So,
So mute the speaker is there.
it's a delay. There's some delay. The mic is on.
Yeah, that is.
Man, what's this, dude? Nobody. Still. Anybody has joined on G Plus?
I can't make that out actually.
So even though I have joined, can you see anybody do that?
Ah, one viewer. See?
That's on the time.
get started. Yeah.
So I think looks like we are
Only
the
inmate.
sole audience for now, at least with the physical meeting
Okay.
that happens.
Yeah. So we will still make the best use of it. We have a couple of viewers online. We'll actually present to them and ourselves. Of course, I think Google Hangout does have a little bit of lag, so I guess people will follow us eventually. So, anyways, thanks Atul. Thanks for so much for coming on board, and of course, we hope other people join in the due course. But let us introduce ourselves. We are actually a startup, and of course, the parent company that we have been around for about 3 years, which has been into data analytics. We called as Roverside, which initially we started to build a bunch of mobile applications, but eventually we figured out data analytics is our core strength, and that's what we have to focus on. And which is really the whole next gen of using data into data visualization. And that's where we come in as a brand new startup, as a part of the parent company, which is focused on data visualization. We've now termed it as clip it, as in how do you clip it, clip and paste. So we've actually called ourselves Clip It, and what we're going to do in the coming few meetups is to actually talk about what is data visualization, how do we actually bring it into mainstream and all of that. Now that's really what we'll be focused on, and I'll have my colleagues also introduce themselves so that way we can actually get started. Sure.
I'm Harris again. So just to give a short brief on myself, I bring over 8 years of experience in the field of data analytics and I've previously worked with multinationals like Deloitte and Warner into it. That's where I met Nagi, your colleagues in it. And that's exactly where we started talking a lot about data visualization and as a subject. Um, what personally excites me most about data, given that I've been mostly on the business side, on the business analysis side of data, is the ability to tell a story or draw insights from data that ultimately leads to a business decision making. And hence, my uh, keenness towards data visualization and my association with this media.
I am on the one side. I did my MBA from IIT Nagpur. When I did my career, I did my internship in Nagi actually as an intern on the other side. Just when I passed it, I joined him because I always wanted to work in the startup culture like that. So I joined him. Of course, when I started being a mechanical engineer for starters and then an MBA in marketing, I had no knowledge of data visualization or analytics to say. But in the 2 years that I've worked in Nagi, I have come to learn a lot on the technical part of it, and a lot of the technical aspects of it. But one of the most important realizations that I've had is something like Harris just said that visualization, you can think of it as a science, but it's a lot of art is involved in the visualization process. And that is something I really strive to do, to be able to tell stories from data rather than just mentioning facts and figures. So that's what I do.
Yep. So basically, the agenda that we laid out was, predominantly, uh, we would go through an exercise of how do you pick up data, something like Facebook, and actually tell a story, right? So this is more of, I'll let Harris jump in here. This is a case study that we did, and we thought this would be a cool idea to actually share. Although we're not sharing any confidential information here, it's still using public data like Facebook, which is really available to all of us. But then it has practical applications in business. So I'll have Harris just give a quick introduction, and then we'll quickly jump into the actual visualization exercise.
Okay. Before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit more about data visualization.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one point that you know I would like to just bring this. We talk about data visualization, but really, what is it and why is it so essential? So, to me personally, and I think many would agree that the human brain can process visuals like a chart or a graph or a map better than looking at just just looking at numbers. So, and I think decision makers at all levels are now beginning to realize that and the potential of data visualization, the ability to interact uh, in real time with data and be able to surface insights on the go. And rather than waiting for some analysts to send them Excel and files of Excel, data visualization just makes it so much more seamless. So I think that's where I think it has great practical applications in image analytics.
And to look at it that way, I mean, the amount of data that is being generated these days is growing exponentially in some way.
Yep,
Not even controllable anymore.
absolutely.
Given that what remains is, so there's so many tools to mine data, to do analytics on that. But what is missing is the part that when you do all that process, when you do find an insight, how do you communicate it well to the person who will really take an action on it? So what's the point of like finding an insight if someone who will really work on it is not even able to understand that or grasp that concept? So that is where visualization really comes in. You don't just find an insight, you also are able to communicate it in the most effective way so that the person who will really take an action understands it and takes an action so that he's improving.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, what we did was, for this entire group here, we actually put up a few topics on what would make more sense, right? And in fact, I asked Abhitaraj to look at some of the top tools that actually will help us visualize data. Why don't you actually give us a quick intro on what tools will help us visualize data?
As far as tools goes, there are a lot of tools out there to visualize data. Now, there's slight difference between each of them. I mean, each of them has their own pros and cons. For example, there are some tools such as D3.js and Tableau is one of the tools. For example, tools like D3.js or Fusion charts, for example, these are a bit more technical tools. They do provide more flexibility in the sense the kind of charts that you can create, but they do require some amount of learning curve, subject matter expertise, so that you can be able to use them. There are other tools such as ClickView and Tableau, which are not that technical. Don't really have that much technical interface. Very user friendly, easy to use, things like that. So these tools are more popular now. For example, Tableau recently is currently one is one of the most popular tools because of one of three basic things. If I may go. First of all, it has a free feature, free version of Tableau popular. Secondly, it's very user friendly, easy to use, very short learning curves and all. Because of all these things, Tableau and third, of course, is the easy sharing capabilities that Tableau has. You can really easily share your charts with you. Anyway, it's Stacy. Any. That's fine. So we're just discussing the kind of visualization tools that we have. So, for example, we're discussing on Tableau. The reason why it's so popular is because it's easy, it's easily shareable. The content that you create can be shared with any number of people easily. And it has a free version where you can test it, learn it, do anything, and then move on to the paid version if you really need it. So, and there are multiple tools that you can really look up on the internet for best tools in visualization. Depending on your need, you can go for more flexibility, more training though, or more free kind of things.
It comes to the point when you ask about what do you need to
Yeah,
show.
exactly.
That way, then you figure out which tool is better for my purpose.
Yeah.
The Tableau also has some restrictions when it comes to designers.
Yeah.
Typically, it has some issues. Like if I want to have some features, I can't have it. So there will be pros and cons to it.
So this is, the give and take of it. I mean, you either get a lot of flexibility, but you need a little more expertise in that, or you get something that you can use off the shelf, but then you will not have all the kind of visualization that you do with something that is more flexible. So these kind of pros and cons are always there. What is required is what will works best for you, and that there's so many that you can really go there and then whichever works best, you can just pick it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Let's just pause a moment
Yes.
and welcome you all.
Rajesh,
I'm Harris.
Harris, Nagi. Nice to meet you, Rajesh. Hi.
I'm the one.
So, in fact, we are just getting started. I mean, together the three of us, Nagi, Amitash, and myself, we represent a startup called Flipper. And why don't you, Nagi, just speak?
Yeah, absolutely. So primarily, we are a data analytics company, and then we, venture into this offshoot of that main company, the parent company, which is focused on data visualization. Because after analyzing data for years and years, one thing that has definitely showed up in my own professional experiences, there's like mountains of data, but then people in even large corporations continue to use retro tools like Excel to draw out their charts in that, but nothing interactive, nothing that can actually give them insights in real time. And that's where I have personally seen a lot of it, and again, my colleagues here have seen and experienced similar things. And that's why we believe there is a whole lot of learning, whole lot of education that can be given out by sharing, by learning together. And that's the reason why we formed this group. And it is going to be an ongoing process because data visualization also has been existing for the last 40, 50 years in its, in all its entirety. But in terms of its embracing, the corporations, rather than professionals embracing it, has been on the poorer side. I mean, even now, the bar chart still excels everything else, right? I mean, that was really 40, 50 years ago, people drew hand by hand, and then now with Excel and everything else, we still have that. But we can actually break that entire retro process, right?
And since you mentioned Excel, I also want to add that a lot of time people do not realize the difference between visualization and just charting and using
Yes.
bar charts and
Yeah.
things. Now, what happens? Things like Excel, for example, what they are a reporting tool, right?
Yes.
For example, if you have an instance, you can validate whether that is correct or not. It's not good. It doesn't have any drillable capabilities that you look at overall picture and then you drill it down to find the source of the problem,
Yeah.
and then go behind it. It doesn't have those kind of features.
Yeah.
Uh, in contrast to creating charts and everything, what I may call reporting. In contrast to that, visualization is forward-looking. Whereas reporting is very backward-looking a process. You look at the amount of data that you, of course, in the past, you say, okay, this happened and this happened.
Yeah.
You may be able to find associations in there, or may not. So you just say this and this happened.
Yeah.
Whereas what visualization does and what it strives to do is be forward-looking, look at data, current data preferably as soon, like preferably last hour's data, and say, okay, this is happening. This is what you can do to prevent something bad or make something good happen. So that is where I would say Excel and all these, not particularly Excel, but any kind of reporting is different from visualization.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In fact, why don't we actually jump into exercise so
Yes.
we can actually demonstrate
Yeah.
all this that we are talking about,
Yep.
right now.
So again, this is going to be a very interactive exercise, and we're just trying to present one case study. I mean, there are so many more. Let's look at it, and we thought this could be something which would appeal to all of us because Facebook is something a lot of us use, and we actually do follow a lot of posts, either with friends or strangers. We do follow a lot of posts, and we have our favorite topics that we definitely follow. Like for instance, a lot of us follow cricket, or a lot of us follow football and sports, or maybe some movies. So these are topics which keep coming up, and they more so have the commonality between a lot of us. And that's why we thought maybe let's actually use something which is as open as Facebook data and see if it can actually make sense. So why don't you go
Yeah.
ahead and let's see what.
Actually, this was actually a real life uh, project that we did for one of our clients, which happens to be a sports magazine. So this happened during the World Cup, the recent World Cup that was going on. So basically, they wanted to do a piece on really what are people talking about with respect to cricket on social media, really, and without really any preceding hypothesis or any story formation insights up ahead. Of course, they have their own editorials, but for this particular piece, they just want to look at open data and really whatever story the data tells us, we'll get editorial input with the story of that. So, but the challenge that they faced was how do I look at thousands and thousands of comments and be able to draw those patterns? Uh, from that data. Ultimately, it's textual data. There are no numbers around it. So actually, it required really a three-way exercise, if you will. First is really being able to extract uh, textual data from Facebook, process it into meaningful or an analytics ready data set, and finally use data visualization tool like Tableau to derive the actual story from it. So really, when we started off, we really had nothing, right? Really no data points to begin with. So
Yeah.
actually, we did a very interesting exercise. Nani, why don't you?
Yeah.
Just,
So all we had was a few hashtags on Facebook, and we started a story looking at that, just those stories or what are the posts that people had kept talking about. And one good thing about open social networks is the fact that people comment a lot. I mean, that's how it is, and that's actually just mountains of data that we can mine. But more importantly, if you're looking at it as an end business case, as Harris was mentioning, they don't want to read thousands of posts and 10,000 comments behind it. how do you literally give them one view and then also give them the supporting data to for them to drill down if they are interested, right? So the way we're going to actually structure this little exercise is we're going to show you the exact steps that we follow, and maybe this will kind of give you the idea of how we can even look at data visualization as another another piece. So if you do look at it, and these are no-brainers. In fact, when you do pick up any hashtag, so right now we're looking at a hashtag of Cricket World Cup 15, which is download this hashtag CWC15. You'll actually see all of these posts load up on your Facebook page, right? So all we need to do is make sure we actually go to each of these comments and pick up those comments and start mining the data. Now, there are a lot of tools which let you mine the comments. We have used some amount of automation, but we actually wanted to take you through those manual steps. So if you want to do it yourself, you can actually try this pretty much by by yourself at home. Now, if you do look at it, every post has the comment section. If you actually right click on it and you'll actually get the link, which will load up for that specific post, you'll see all the comments that's actually listed out here, right? At the end of the day, what it means is you could literally capture all these comments in a JSON format, which can be eventually converted into a text or a CSV file, right? So if you do see it, all we need to do is using the Graph Facebook API, you can load up the JSON comments from here. So from JSON, literally what you do is you can start using a JSON dash CSV. In fact, let me quickly open up. I'm sure you guys may have seen similar tools. Yeah, so you have a lot of plugins like even from Python or other software that is available. So if you were to just plug in that JSON out here, it will just spit out a CSV. Now you could literally pick up all the comments into JSON, push it into CSV, and make like one huge CSV file which contains all the comments in that file, right? And once you actually have all the comments in one place, you could actually use something like, and this is really not our expertise because this is not where we excel in terms of creating sentiments about data. So what we did was we actually used something like Alchemy API, which really gives you the capability of picking up all the data that we've thrown at it and segmenting into keywords, entities, and context. Along with that, it also shows you what is a relevant keyword and what is the sentiment around it. Of course, that is not our expertise because we are not data segmentation experts. But what we want to become is data visualization experts, right? So we wanted to spend a lot more time on that, which is why I'm not going to walk you through a lot of these backend processes. But if you guys are interested, we can have another session where we will actually look at what does those APIs mean to extract segmented data. But long story short, once you can actually, in fact, there's a demo piece. You can get your own free API key on this website. So if you download it, if you go through this website, it will actually be a very simple process of converting those comments into segmented data for keywords, context, and entities. So once you have that data, you basically will lead into a holistic data set which contains literally something which I'll have Amritansh run in a minute. But what it contains is a CSV file that contains keywords, entities, relevance score, and then sentiment score. So that's really how it contains. And I'll actually have Amritansh pick up that data and talk us through the data, how it looked like, some of the challenges of that data, and how we can start visualizing that data.
So I got three data sets from Nagi. First was about keywords, which had basically three major fields. One was the keyword itself. Second was its relevance, which meant how frequently, if I may, was a particular keyword being talked about. And the third was the sentiment score, which represented whether it was being talked about in a positive or negative way. The second data set I had was a similar thing where it was about entities and their relevance and sentiment around them. The difference between the keywords and the entities is that entities are like people, places, organizations, individual entities that people are talking about. Keywords could be anything. So I had the sentiment and relevance around entities. I also had the entity type that was thrown out there. The third data set that I had was it was about the subject and the object of the conversation. And what is the sentiment around the subject and the sentiment around the object of the conversation with their relevance. Finally, I also had the raw data, the raw text of the raw comments itself to use if I wanted. So the first thing that I did, so I created a few charts, dashboards around it. So the first dashboard that I created was the relevance dashboard. Now here what we want to look at is what are the most important, most relevant pieces that people are talking about. So for example, underneath it's the keywords, their relevance and the sentiment around those keywords. So I picked up the top 10 relevant keywords. I know you don't want to look at the long tail, right? So I picked up top 10 relevant keywords. Along with those, I had the entities. So similarly, entities, what are the top 10 most relevant entities, their sentiment, the sentiment around them. Also segregated this by the entity type. So for example, the entity type could be person, city, country, organization, company, etc. So I also had this information here. I also had information of what was the relevance of each of these entity types. So for example, you can also drill down. For example, if you select person, it will only show up people and what was their relevance. If you pick up a country, it will also only show up what was the relevance of those countries in the conversation and what was the sentiment around those countries. Here you had the overall sentiment around that particular type. For example, if it was a person, what was a positive about, how much of the conversation was positive about people, how much of the conversation about people was negative, and how much of it was neutral. Similarly about country. This is at the broad level. The second dashboard that I created was the sentiment. Now, this was the first dashboard was relevant. So you look at the most important pieces of the conversation and see the sentiment around it. The second dashboard, you could also want to take a different approach. You want to look at uh, what is the general sentiment of the people, and then go behind that approach. Are a lot of people negative about all of this? And if they are, then what is the point that they are negative? Because, for example, something that might not be in the top 10 might be the reason why most of the people are talking negatively. So I went behind something called a sentiment dashboard that I created. So overall, you just simply look at, okay, how much of the conversation is neutral, how much of it is positive, how much of it is negative. In that, you of course have the entities, and here the keywords, the same thing with keywords. In that, you have the entities and what are the top relevant entities in that context. Now, here again, you could filter down, drill down based on the entity type. So, like previous chart, you can again see here, for example, let me put it this way. So overall, you see there is about 40% of neutrality in the conversation. Similarly, you could go behind, just look at how much conversation was around people, and you see more opinions around people rather than just neutral conversation. So this was around sentiments, and go behind each sentiment individually. You can sort based on sentiment or relevance, because based on what you preferred and what kind of data you preferred to look at. So this was the second thing. The third one that I created was relations actor. Now this left side represents the subject of the conversation, and the right pane represents the object of the conversation. And you see what is the sentiment around them, each of them. Now, here, what we wanted to do was, let's say if somebody is talking about, let's say me, and along with that, let's say they're talking about something I might have done in an organization, what is their opinion about me and what is their opinion about that organization? So both the subject and the object, and see if there were any patterns in it. There might be, there might not be, but we wanted to be able to look at that. So for example, if we wanted to see what are the positive things that people are talking about, and were the objects also positive or not. Similarly, if there was something that people were talking, the objects of the conversation were positive, and so there could be some subjects that were negative, but the object of it was positive. So this kind of capability, drill down capability was here. Additionally, what you could also see here was just look at one type of conversation. You want to look at only negative conversation, only negative subjects, and then see what was being said about them. So you could pick it up from here, and vice versa. Similarly for the objects, you could do the same thing. So these were the three dashboards that I created for drill down capability into looking at trying to find a story in there. And Harris, would you like to pick up how you found a story
Yeah.
from this?
Yeah. So now, given we have now that we have seen how we can actually pick up purely textual data and really convert it into numbers, put like a lot of numbers around it. Now, as a business guy, I have to you know go with a solid pitch to the my client who happens to be the sports magazine, and be able to tell them one compelling story that they can actually pick up and write about. So, in this particular case, unlike if you may have seen in the field of analytics, we typically begin insights exploration with already a preset hypothesis or like a set of metrics that we want to report on. And usually, in that case, we narrow our analysis only to that particular vertical, and thereby really ignore a lot what data tells us. And this was actually a huge learning course where we actually didn't have any to begin with. Really, we should really what conversion funnel we should be looking at. Really nothing. And then once we had the data, I mean, and this is the power of visualization. Like just looking at it, I can make out that a lot of conversation centered about persons. In this case, cricketers. So I mean, just looking at this, I could feel that okay, there's a story forming here, and um, so as a second step, I went and used Amritansh's sentiment dashboard, and I thought, let me see, really, you know, how, what are people discussing about persons per se. So now, once I drill down further, I actually see that okay, these are the cricketers that are being spoken about a lot. So definitely, they have been in the news for some of the other reasons. Also, I can see the sentiments go around it. But you know, still I felt the data is still not yet ready for going and having a business conversation with. So that's when I asked Amritansh if he could put this into really one single window that really tells us the whole story with and allows me to talk a lot with a client instead of really having to put two or three uh, charts in front of him. So we went on to create this word cloud that actually really sums up everything. Amritansh, if you could just see there is open up the word cloud. Yeah. So really, the final data that I put out, really, this is the summation of it. Now, what this really tells us is, first I'll just walk you through how you really read this data. So just like any word cloud, the size of a particular keyword denotes the relevance it had in that particular set of conversation, and the color coding actually denotes the degree of sentiments. So, for example, here I can see Mahendra Singh Dhoni was spoken about a lot and largely positively. But a cricketer called JP Dumni was maybe he didn't occupy a large share of the conversation, but whatever people spoke about him was largely positive because that's dark green. So really, just looking at this data and hovering over it, I can actually, uh, yeah, 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 absolutely. I can see relevance and the sentiments go. And now this begins to form a nice story. I know Virat Kohli was in the news, but his opinion on it was fairly balanced. People were not talking too much about him positively, neither negatively. So this itself, I mean, just when I showed this to my client, he, he actually started rattling out the story because he kind of had the domain knowledge about really what has happened in the last 1 week or so. However, we actually went a step ahead, and we even kept a record of actually all individual comments, at a rolled up aggregate level. So, which is actually present in, yeah, let me just bring up that dashboard. So, like for example, I want to know okay, why is Umesh Yadav so negative? So, I actually go down and, you know, yeah. So, these are the actual comments that we actually got off Facebook. So, uh, not only do I have the data that tells me a story, but I have the supporting facts along with it. So you can see, very dirty bowling for Umesh Yadav, base bowler Umesh Yadav. So really, these were the kind of sentiments around Umesh Yadav. So now, if you stitch this and the actual word of cloud together, you actually have a very compelling story to tell. And this actually, this became the basis for, right for that particular article. So that's
So basically, going just to kind of in the story, having to look at a bunch of posts on Facebook. This is really what it was, which is to say, following all the stories, all the comments, and bringing out the sentiment around it or relevance. Now, what will happen is in a given word, obviously people would pick up their posts and run with it. Now, let's assume there were many, many of them, and this is really the reality of the current day, right? Which one would you like to even follow? Something that would like give you like more of like a trending effect upfront, telling you what is happening inside. As again, you reading every comment. Maybe you're not even interested in a entire set of articles. Maybe you are, but to give you a leading indicator as to whether you even want to follow. This we found was a better way to actually look at that entire set in almost like 30 seconds. And if I find something compelling, like for instance, if I went in with the hypothesis that, you know what, Yadav bowled very well, it should have been very well supported, but then I see him in the dark red, suddenly I get attracted. As against, I would never be able to read in the comments thousands of them to get that whole side. So this is where we believe, and this actually has, business context, even in other kinds of business, like maybe in marketing or maybe in product analytics, any kind of what you see, and that's where we believe there is so much to unearth, and the tools are just coming off, and Tableau is something that we use for this project, and we look out for other we call open sources. But where we find it interesting with Tableau is, and we kind of have been really let's say evangelists of Tableau, only because there is so much one can do without having to have a technical know-how. I mean, we do bring valid points in terms of customizing it, but then we actually saw that 80% of business users don't customize it as well. They just want to interact with the data, and as you saw, Alice interacting in real time, which is kind of not possible with pivot charts and and things on Excel, which is really one of the world's extensive tool when it comes to reporting and data. So that's really what we thought. Let's share and definitely find out what other people are thinking, and that's where we can continue to collaborate with a lot of other people who are keen on data visualization. And over a period of time, we actually form a community. Right now, of course, this is our first one, so we just got together, and we're hoping once we have enough people talking about this, we should be able to bring in more content from the web and actually surface it on our group. That way, we can continue to share from our end. And I'm sure a lot of people would have their own experiences that can bring to the table. And as a community, we can continue to go because you know data has been looked upon as a bunch of what do you call only accessible to analysts and to the folks. But that's really not the true thing, right? Because data visualization has happened in every step. Uh, the only thing is how can you actually make it mainstream and make it available to almost everybody. We do see infographics in major business magazines or business newspapers, but not so much in the daily newspapers. But it continues to exist. But how do you bring this to the mainstream and make it available? Like, imagine if Facebook can actually run on a bunch of posts that they actually show something like this upfront, then users can follow it, and based on that can lead you to something more interesting. So that's really our lookout. Love to hear your thoughts and any questions or concerns that you have. Anything that like to see in the future. We can continue to collaborate with online groups and bring in content from everywhere. And continue to post it online, and that's where we can collaborate.
So, since last like 1 year, it has been many years since I worked with Gavin
Yeah,
and other softwares also.
yeah,
So, the tools, the problem, not the problem, the good and the bad, the pros and the cons, which comes with the tools. That's the later part. But before, when you're trying to decide like what metrics to show, like you started out that I need to show the relevance, I need to show the examples. So how do you come to that point, that deciding factor, like what is good for business, what is good for the whole picture, to show the whole picture. So that's also one major point to where it's more about data collection and then you normalize it, and then you think of filter it, and then you think of like the story, what story you could show. But we don't know right now that what story you could show, but it could show. So then how you do that and then try and method with visualizations, feeding it and see how things work out.
yeah,
Whether this contains to might not be,
yeah.
sometimes it is. That's what is good about visualization basically, because it gives the language
Yeah.
to the number.
Agreed. Agreed.
And as you talked about the perception and cognitive perception of the human mind, so that's of course it's there, and artists and designers understand those things because they deal with that. But for the business people to understand, it is slowly coming into
Yeah,
picture.
it's an evolutionary process,
Yeah.
and I think data visualization is really growing into it. It's already making inroads in bridging that gap. It's like really empowering, every decision maker to really play around with data in a visual format, which, is more understandable for him. And and may not even need the help of an analyst to, he will supply those numbers in me.
So that is actually kind of needed, isn't it? Because what is going on exactly in the business, and analyst is not really aware of that. For example, something happens in say if the website is down, it's not the analyst's job to know all these things. With visualization, if it's something that everybody can do with their own share. So, for example, anything goes on in marketing, the marketing guy himself is doing this analysis easily, just drilling down in a report and saying, okay, this is the cost of what is going on here. Because he has the answer. It's not the analyst that has all the answer. Data you still ask around. So that is something that this what is we are going towards trying to
To
bridge
your
the gap.
point, right now I'm working with a product where I have many stakeholders. It is from data science guy to the end user, which is using the product somewhere in the world. So I have to come up with an interface where it's more like every player come into picture, and still on based on the same model, everyone can see the data and how it is. So for a user who is actually using some very novice user, so I would have some priority of data that I won't show him these use details, and I'll make it more simple in the language terms. And when it comes to the data science guy, it's more of a detailed down scenario where he could feed in all the data which is has, but he also sees the impact what it creates on the business. So then it becomes more easy for data science guy to decide like, okay, you could have taken that data also. So in that way, collaboration between the designers, the analysts, and the engineers becomes very strong. So and it would come in future more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just that the web-based collaboration, was something that did not impact video visualization for a long time. Although we have a lot of web-based tools for a lot of other services and products, visualization is something that is, I would say, it's not more than like 3 4 years. It's been actually taking a lot of French, front, the front end side. Because otherwise, it's been predominantly a software-based interaction where I cannot even share with the rest of my audience. But with the advent of definitely like Google Charts and JS or Fusion Charts or HiChart, it just becomes so much more easy to share the insight almost in real time with the web. It is just that when you look at a bunch of tools, you still have to kind of look at what would make more sense to like really participating in real time. Like for instance, Tableau came in very close to our favorite set of tools only because without having to spend a lot of time in coding, we can actually connect with the data and not the live data, which is a more meaningful thing. As against trying to bring in data warehouse, summarize it, create roll tables, and all of that. This made more sense in connecting to any kind of backend data.
Like you say, 80-20 rule exists everywhere.
Yeah.
So with Tableau, 80% of the problems are solved with these 20% types of charts that you can create. So any kind of visualization, you have 80% of those problems you can really solve with these. So that's why it becomes like a good answer as opposed to something that is more technical because you need those 80% of the charts for the rest of the 20% of the problems that you have. So in that context also Tableau figured out well because we had those basic charts that we really needed for most of the problems.
Yeah. So, any other thoughts? Anything that you would like to discuss? Anything specific? Something that comes to you?
Like I said, looks, sorry, I got it now. So what I was saying is, it's good to start off with something, at least in the picture, okay, this starting point, and later on we can take up more bigger issues and other topics also, in general.
Totally, totally. So, yeah, I mean, I would love to actually, take your help as well. So, please come and join us. And I will be here. I'm not sure where you guys place, but if you're local and not too far away from here, so we could definitely meet more often and actually brainstorm on some of these content and bring that kind of content to this community. Because I know, although we just maybe a handful online and just a handful of them in the room, but this is bound to grow only because what happens is there's not one place where we can actually get all this information from, right? So it's a constant learning thing. See, even now, even today, we actually go dig out information from every part of the web. But what if we could centralize it? So it becomes really easy for people to learn and get educated on, right? And that's the whole perspective that we are applying here. And here the whole objective is very simple. How can we empower ourselves as a community where we can actually go make a difference to the rest of the world? Now that could be literally anything. So business is definitely one function, but there are these whole social concepts and social topics that completely goes unnoticed. And how do you bring about?
And in the age of now, when you have a lot of data which is floating around just to be taken up, but people are not looking at them.
Exactly.
Majorly the social issues, all the public data is over there on the website.
Absolutely.
It's just in the reports and the PDFs and all those things.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, one other thing which I also realize is there are a lot of people who actually put out a lot of different kind of apps, right? And there are these socially available apps where, like, I'm sure there are apps which actually let you complain about certain things. Like there's one app which says I paid a bribe or something like that, or there's an app on there's a whole anti-corruption thing. People actually put out enough number of complaints. But the fact is, it stays in an Excel sheet or back in database. Nobody's seeing it, and nobody wants to read like tons of text complaints. But imagine if you were able to just pick that whole thing up and put it as a word cloud and surface it on the web, on Facebook or other media. Imagine the power of it. Right? Suddenly, I'm looking at millions of rows of data to a compressed form, and people can actually ask questions: Why is this happening? At least empower them to ask the right questions. As against today, we don't even know what is happening. For instance, one of the things that thought that crosses my mind is you do see a lot of these cabs which actually carry a little tag that says, "Am I driving harsh or complain crash driving?" I'm sure there are a few apps which we can actually complain and say, "No, I spotted this guy driving crash," but that data sits in one place. What do
I
you
mean,
do?
what happens if you put it on Facebook, you get some 50 likes and few people will comment, and then
That's
it's just lost on itself.
And besides, even getting to that stage is not something that a lot of times it doesn't really happen. For example, what happens is people who have this data are sitting inside of it. They don't really know what to do with it. They have the data, but they don't know what to do with it. For example, remember the example of Anne Rosling's data?
Yes.
All this data, so he came up, he picked up all that data from United Nations and World Health Organization data, and the kind of insights he generated about world and the population and everything. So he literally goes on to say that the world population will never increase from 10 million. If we can so confidently say that, and all that data was already there, it's not like it wasn't there.
absolutely.
Similarly, all this data that we're talking about is just sitting there. And it's not anybody's fault per se. It's just that those who have it don't really know what to do with it. And that is where we want to bring in this collaboration. Where anyone and everyone who is somehow related to data or visualization can come together and see what they can do with what they have.
Absolutely, absolutely. So basically, it applies to both business and social alike. It says that we can produce all the data, but what next? And the worst part of it is, as every second goes by, the data is like blowing up and exploding by a million times. What do we really do with it? So,
And really, like, whatever we speak, that actually has been the vision behind Clifford, actually. You know, like, we come from a very similar industry, having the similar pain points, and then now we are seeing, like, this is our strat. There's so much of conversation happening socially and otherwise, and like one of our goals is to really surface a lot of this data as insights, and in the process, teach ourselves and share those learnings with others. And in the process, like build a community where like everybody is really running, learning off each other, is sharing thoughts and ideas, discovering opportunities together. I mean, you should be applying your work. You could, it could be like the next career move for you. It could be starting off on your own. So we are really just trying to connect people who have a passion for data and data visualization. In a really, like you said, putting it together under one roof. So really, just this is something that is going to be more for community based, a very social kind of platform, collaboration platform that we are coming up with. So we are not in live, but yeah, we soon be there. But however, please continue to like engage with us through Facebook and LinkedIn and other mediums. Until then, we'll actually I'd love to keep hearing from you guys and let us know like really what is what is it that you want to like, for example, what the next meetup should be all about, or this anything that you're struggling with, anything from problem solving.
Yeah, starting from
Tableau, like really anything, I mean, we may not know everything, but it gives us an opportunity for us to like come together like this and really just talk about it, brainstorm, and like come up with those findings and then really just share it with the rest of the community of analytics, of analysts, and
Yeah, I mean, if I may ask you, let's say, why did you want to come to this meetup? There would have been a pain point, right?
Yeah. So
There would be something that you wanted to do. So please go ahead.
yeah. So the thing was that Facebook didn't interest me. What interested me was to socialize and meet new people, to bring in more knowledge or more viewpoints on the table, basically. So that's how we grow.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, that's the mission beyond. It's not just about learning, but it's about socializing and having some fun. Like we all know, we all have worked in different companies, and peer-to-peer connections is really what makes you. Really, there's nothing else. So we all know that very well, and might as well leverage that. While we can.
And in collaboration, like you always say, collective wisdom versus individual wisdom. In collaboration, you get to learn from each other. So, there's so much of learning activity and all these things involved, but you grow in whatever field that you want to be in. So that is one of the things that I really look forward to with this kind of socializing.
So what about you? So what was your one major thing that you found?
So I I lead the analytics practice at next data center in cloud.
Okay.
So he doesn't have anything related to analytics. I have to take care.
Okay.
So since data center has a lot of data, so customer wanted can you do something about analytics based service? Sure. Where the data exists instead of moving it out and then I should like to do it again. So my job is to add analytical capabilities apart from the infrastructure offering.
Okay.
So data visualization as a service is one service we created, which can cater to multiple customers. Because the analytics is very specific to each customer, advanced analytics.
Yes.
But visualization, when our customers are SMEs and visualization is still, they have not even tried to visualize their data. This is the first step we took towards analytics. The first step towards analytics. For many of the SMEs, we are trying.
Got it.
So I can relate to everything we've said, and this is what I would try to sell to all the SMEs.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
What we here is we do that on a professional level, maybe in my day job, but that is through tools like Tableau or Gremlin.
Yes.
So now on a personal level, I would like to be able to do it myself and volunteer kind of part time and do something on my own also.
Okay.
So you want to learn something on that time also. The Tableau is more like enterprise for enterprise.
We also have the Tableau public.
The online, yeah.
Yes.
If you have a
That is-
ID card, you will get it from very almost.
Yeah, so Tableau Public has both a client and a server library. So you can actually download the client and actually do everything like you do on professional. The only difference being you cannot connect to backend data sources
Yeah.
besides CSV and Excel. So that's a major drawback, however. But yeah, but as you said, if you have access to a suite anytime, one way or other. And that's why I think what we can also think about doing is, see, we may not be able to afford each of these software individually, but as a group when we come together, we actually create capabilities where we can actually host it on the cloud, even a professional version, we can host it on a Windows cloud, and actually have even access to all our users. Okay, that's totally possible. So nobody's stopping us from doing that. And once I'm sure a lot of us come together, we can even go back to Tableau and say, you know what, we keep throwing in as many users, give us for free because we're actually helping you, surface this up. So, anyways, there are possibilities. But yeah, I mean, so you're around the area now here, right? Okay, so that's quite fun. Yeah, so I think a lot of people do like it still on the web. Like we did see 3 or 4 people logging in from the Google Hangout. So we try and actually mix it up in both ways because we thought people in Toronto would want to kind of join us. That's why we said, okay, this is a small setup, but what we have for conference. So for 10, 15 people would still make sense, and then the rest can be opened up for Google Hangout. But yeah, I would love to collaborate in each way, and if you continue to see things that you can actually go and extract from the web and share it with you and the rest of the community. Just keep us posted and everything that if you have any ideas and you would actually find out, love to have the sessions like this where we can see your idea, your perspective, and have the rest of people.
In fact, when we actually go live with it, one of the things that we want to empower the members exposing all this publicly. So if you are passionate about any topic, and you want to uh, visualize it and share, with the rest of the world how you arrive at it. And we're gonna be actually exploring a lot of open source tools and platforms that we work with, and really put a nice UI around it where actually our members can just use that straight off the bat and really be able to create this on the community, share it with everyone, and really, who knows? I mean, if anything goes viral, that person just
Absolutely.
instantly
Absolutely.
become a celebrity overnight.
Yeah.
So we are just, that's the idea, because often what happens in daily work, we have called for years and years as analysts, and there's so much you want to do, there's so much that you want to talk about, but in the realm of your own professional world, you may not be able to achieve that. And that's where we want to bring in a lot of open data, a lot of open sources that you can play around and really enhance their skills and share and learn. That's really the idea.
Like for instance, Wikipedia, the data is available up until the last hour actually. All the posts that happen, everything that happens is available up until the last hour. The one cannot even imagine using that kind of data on their own thing, unless they have access to the cloud-based infrastructure. But if you were to actually, like for instance, Facebook, where you can upload videos and everything else, if we could actually have something in the back end where you don't have to worry about any of those issues, like be it the cloud storage or the cloud processing engine or even the API that can talk to the data and give you what you need. And that's the whole idea. We want to actually put it out there more as a social framework where anybody should be able to connect to any kind of data that is available openly and start visualizing it. That's the whole idea. So Clipit is all about making it go social. Like the whole again vision here is, can we be really the Facebook of visualization as against just pure posts of videos and comments and like, can you actually have people compress all of that in a single visual that can paint a better story? And as I said, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And that's really what we're looking at. So yeah, so that's a journey we've begun, and any amount of contribution would be appreciated. So feel free to join us, and we are right here, and we're available on Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. We love to hear from you and continue to have this journey. And as I said, this is just coming together right now. So although you may be a handful, but that's how any journey begins, just a handful. So yeah, I'd love to keep hearing from you guys and then continue the journey.
Next week we can discuss about what not to do in the generation.
Absolutely.
I mean, trust me, if you want to come and talk about that,
Yeah,
you're welcome.
See,
We can get
that's
into
the
the
idea of
idea.
collaboration, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Because, like I said, we really don't know everything. We can only talk about what we know, but we actually love to learn more from people like you, and really, and then again we share that with people who don't know. So really, then that's the whole idea to forums like this, to events, even online to our own platform. We just want to reach out and really just do things a better way. It's high time the analytics industry kind of woke up. I mean, definitely there's a lot going on in the back end the way you process data now. You can process a lot of, we have people can work with data and stuff. But again, that's a technological part of it. You see, like, eventually we come down to an Excel or a PowerPoint to present our data to a senior manager, who then again has to, who can only see limited insights from it. So when it really comes to drawing insights, which is really, where your whole data approach should lead you to, that's where we fail mostly. Like I said, we start with the hypothesis and we just look at that and really not depend on what people that can tell us. And that's really where we want to really get a whole mindset change at the way we look at data. To using visualization as a medium, I mean, definitely we could go even beyond that and see how really we can just work, bring those core competencies and expertise in the way we look at insights.
yep. So I'm just going to actually rotate a quick form. You can just leave your number or contact behind. You can actually put that in the database for me to reach out to you guys.
You can find my portfolio online.
Oh.
There you can
Awesome. That was great, actually. In fact, have you already socialized it in a way that people are already
I
talking about?
forwarded it to government also.
Oh,
There were issues with the government report. So I found out those things.
Oh.
Like two reports from the the same source
Okay.
shows two different data. So highlighting those things I did it and I send it to commissioner and nothing happened actually.
No, actually, the thing is,
This is exactly
this is
what we want to
exactly what we want to
surface.
surface and let people, in fact, definitely it has to go to the right authorities. But in the meantime, it should also showcase on people's own data because if thousands of it come, it maybe like handful of it will still get caught. But even that is great stuff, right? So
Yeah, this is good. Some details.
You're still using Tableau, it's not a different tool.
So the Pivot is more of a social network for visualization. So one of the tools that could be used within Pivot, as getting a visualization done could be Tableau. But over a period of time, the vision is to actually start building something within the social network where you can, like, say, for instance, Facebook, you can upload your own video and it becomes a Facebook video as a YouTube video. So right now it will be like connecting to a YouTube, but over a period of time, you could have capabilities like using JS or HiChart. You could have like a built-in capability where not only you can connect to the data, you could also process it and also bring about visualization using the same. So that's the whole objective, but that's the long journey. But we would like to kind of continue this as more of a community as against trying to build it up as a tool ourselves and then bring it out to people.
You're mentioning your
Yeah, portfolio.
portfolio.
Yeah, it's on Behance.net.
I think I have seen that actually. Behance, of course, I've been to Behance, but
I did many work on physical
you
visualization.
can actually stop it now. Yes.
Stop, please.